Chapter 1. All that stuff I can hardly remember. It was the hippest of times. It was the funkiest of times. It was the 1970s. 10 years or so before, back in the mists of time, my mom and dad had met on the Kodachrome streets of New Jersey. On a bus. When my mom stepped off the bus, my father followed, asked if he could walk with her, and the rest resulted in 3 little kids. My brother Keith was born in 1961, a strapping young lad with the possibility of a bright future ahead of him. My sister Audrey, born in 1963, possessed both beauty and talent enough to last a lifetime and more. I was born in 1965, with a smirk on my face and an aptitude towards seeing all the angles, which I would surely put to good use. Then my dad left and screwed it all up. In fairness, my mom and dad weren't really prepared for what their lives had brought them. Both were orphaned at a young age. My mom, originally from somewhere north, possibly Quebec, but definitely somewhere in Canada, came from a mixed French extraction. I say mixed only because nobody is really sure what other ethnicity is involved. The few details we eventually learned from her adoption papers suggest that she comes from promiscuous circus folk. Of course. But when it came right down to it, though, my mom was basically a vessel of love, an unending river that both gave love and needed love. But she never seemed to have been raised for more than that. So when my dad left her in 1970 with 3 kids to raise alone, that vessel of love broke. My mom spent most of the 70s just trying to piece herself back together again. My father was French and proud of it. He also came from a family of religious nuts, which I suppose means I come from a line of promiscuous, ultra-religious circus folk. You can imagine my relief at finding that out. My dad's folks came out of a time when things like love and affection were left to the women folk. And so was my dad. My dad was abandoned at a very young age and was fortunate to be raised by his aunts, Anna and Ruby. He was a sickly kid with 1,000,001 talents. By the time he grew up, he was everything my mother was not: enterprising, industrious, cold-hearted, twisted. The two worked well on paper. My mom had the love for the kids. My dad had the discipline. Well, he liked to discipline kids, at least. His methods were a bit odd, such as when he would send us under our bed as punishment. Perhaps he thought we were dogs. What do 2 orphans know about raising kids? Sadly, not a whole lot. And let's not forget, this was still the 1960s, a decade neither of my parents were suited for. As the old joke goes, they took 2 50s and went right into the 70s. But the 60s did not avoid them. I recall my sister telling me about how my dad wanted my mom to abort me when she was pregnant. Roe v. Wade didn't come along until the 1970s, but there were plenty of unsafe abortions at your local butchery just ready for some young mother of 2 with a 3rd on the way. Mind you, that may have just been a rumor, but even my mom told me about the time my dad tried to put all of us kids up for adoption. He just wasn't ready. In the parlance of the day, he needed his space. So my dad left us. He left us again and again. Truth be told, he wasn't particularly good at it. But by 1970, he was gone, just as I was getting old enough to form permanent memories. My brother Keith would remember those years with our father better than I. Many of those memories were of a cold, distant man. Others, such as the times when he would bring home these big cardboard boxes from work and we would draw on them to make them look like cars, get inside of them with holes cut for our heads and arms and legs, and race them around the living room, reminded us of a man who did show affection now and then. He just didn't quite know how.